Well, hey everyone out there. Um, Jumped on here a couple minutes early. Just wanted to apologize for the technical difficulties that Vimeo was having Wednesday evening. So I'm hoping everyone is joining back. And I know we still got a little bit of time going, but jump on and follow. And I hope you all enjoy it. We're going to be reading chapter 2 called The Annex. And we are going to be starting with when Roan and Jack entered into the compound. But again, for everybody else, I just want to remind them until we get actually started here in another minute or so, is that please check out Shadow Warriors Project. It is a nonprofit that me and my wife started, and any donations would be great and would be greatly appreciated. Also, to let everybody know, we are starting a dog program as well. We will be launching our landing page for that really soon. And our mission is to, through the use of the dogs that we get from Baden Canine out of Hallam, Canada, up by Toronto, um, helping those service members and contractors who struggle with that transition back into regular life. I've got one myself. Her name is Roan, obviously named after Tyrone Woods. But just wanted to let y'all know a little bit about that. You'll be able to check us out on our landing page. It'll show up on shadowwarriorsproject.org. So let's get started here. Hopefully we won't have the same technical difficulties as Wednesday, and I think we've upgraded the bandwidth, so hopefully we won't have the delays in the connection either. So Roan and Jack pulled into the CI annex, a lush walled oasis in the rough desert of Benghazi. Originally built by a wealthy Libyan hotel owner as a compound, the property was nearly square and covered more than 2 acres of land. Its generous size, perimeter walls, and multiple houses, but most of all, its proximity to the State Department Special Mission Compound made it an ideal base of operations for the U.S. Covert Intelligence Service. For a price, the hotel owner was happy to rent out to the Americans and move his family elsewhere. The annex main features were a guard post, a gardener's shack, and 4 comfortable one-story houses, each with about 3,000 square feet of living space. Large, well-tended lawns stretched behind each house to the surrounding walls. The houses were repurposed as combination work and residential quarters for roughly 20 Americans on site, which included us, the Benghazi CIA annex team, as well as the base chief, Bob, his deputy, male and female case officers, analysts, translators, specialists, and of course, the GRS operators. A wide driveway cut diagonally through the annex property, and at its center was a small triangular courtyard where 4 turtles wandered in the shade of a picnic table. After the pickup was checked for explosives, Roan drove Jack to the furthest house from the gate, which the Americans called Building C. The annex's command center, Building C, contained the most secure intelligence area, the Sensitive Compartmental Information Facility, or SCIF, accessible only through a heavy steel door with a cipher lock. Building C also housed a kitchen and that had been transformed into a medical area, 2 bedrooms, and a room where annex security staffers watched monitors from the video cameras mounted on the perimeter walls and throughout the property. As Jack and Roan walked through the building, Roan introduced Jack to the security team, an interpreter, several case officers, and CIA Chief Bob. Also in Building C was the GRS team room, the operator's command post, with a broken in couch and a wall of wooden cubbies that looked like high school lockers without doors. The cubbies overflowed with the operators' assault rifles, night vision goggles, helmets, body armor, ammunition, and everything else they needed to keep other Americans safe. Some operators personalized their cubbies, hanging photos of their wives and children. Along another wall were desks with computers and a whiteboard that recorded the operator's schedule for the week. The second whiteboard contained notices and classified intelligence updates. Whenever a CIA case officer planned a meeting with a source to gather intel, he or she individually gave the GRS operators at least a couple days' warning to plan for their safety. If they didn't know the area well, the operators headed to their computers and used special mapping software developed for the military. Then, if time allowed, they'd get a feel for the place and familiarize themselves with the people who frequented it. Barone told Jack that scenario was rare. Case officers in Benghazi seldom gave them much time, so he needed to be ready to scramble at a moment's notice. Everything in Benghazi was on short fuse, Rohn explained, making it difficult for operators to feel comfortable about providing adequate security. On the inside of Building C were generators and a swimming pool shaped like a shark's tooth, with swampy greenish brown water and a half dozen or so goldfish named for several of the past operators. The operators built a filtration system, partially covered the pool with a wooden deck and called it the pond. At the back of Building C were glass doors that faced the annex compound's north wall. Beyond that wall was an enormous stockyard with more than a dozen large rectangular tin roof buildings. Annex residents could hear sheep heading for slaughter, bleating and whining inside. Roon told Jack that the operators called the area north and east of the annex walls Zombie Land because it looked like the set of a movie about the undead. On the far side of the annex east wall was an acre of shrubs and trees, and beyond that stood a compound with a single-story home. To the south, across Annex Road, other were other homes and a four-story concrete building under construction. Further south, about a half mile away, was a dirt oval horse track. Every Thursday night was race night, featuring high-spirited Arabian stallions. And to the west of the annex was another walled compound with a single large concrete home. The Diplomatic Special Mission Compound was located to the northwest of the annex, across the Fourth Ring Road, only about a half mile away as the crow flies, and within 10 minutes on foot. The operators had embedded broken glass atop the annex walls for added security, but the walls were no protection from the thick smell of manure and the swarm of flies drawn to the neighborhood by the stockyard, the racetrack, and the pond. Buzzing veils of insects made life miserable for the GRS operators. Flies landed on their sweaty faces and rattled in their ears when they lifted weights at the makeshift workout area that they called their prison gym, located under a carport roof on the east of Building C. Roan continued showing Jack around the property. Building A, closest to the front gate, housed 4 bedrooms and the main dining area, where an American chef prepared meals with the freshest local ingredients he could muster. Chicken and rice were staples, but they sometimes feasted on thick steaks. The chief earned the GRS operator's affection by keeping the refrigerator stocked with leftovers for nights when they returned late to the annex. Building B on the east side of the annex provided housing and workspace, as did Building D on the west side, where Roan led Jack with his bags. Jack had 3 basic standards for a GRS workplace: good food, a good workout area, and his own room. Roan assured him that the food would be fine, but otherwise Benghazi was a bust. The workout area was a fly-specked mess, and Jack would be sharing a room. A heavy curtain strung down the middle provided the fig leaf of privacy. At least Jack would get along with his roommate, the GRS operator named John Tigan, also known as Tig. Tig was a laid back 36-year-old former Marine. He had brown hair, a close cropped goatee, and a wary expression that he had occasionally relaxed into a smile. He stood 5'11", weighed 200 rock solid pounds, wore wire rimmed glasses, and sported a pair of dragon tattoos on each side of his chest. Tig grew up in Colorado, in the sort of situation that typically leads nowhere or worse. A fractured family that included a father who disappeared before Tig's third birthday. He developed an attitude toward school that ranged from clownish to bored, making it easy for teachers to ignore him, which was fine with Tig. When Tig was an aimless high school freshman, he stopped by the home of a friend's girlfriend one night where steaks were on the grill. You want one? The girl's father asked. When Tig answered yes, the man said, go mow the lawn. The connection between hard work and reward, discipline and order, had never been part of his life. Earning that steak satisfied Tig in a way he couldn't quite describe. He barely knew his friend's girlfriend, but within a month he had moved into a bedroom with her father built for him in the basement. With help from his surrogate father, Tig set himself up on a new path. He enlisted in the Marines before his 18th birthday because it was the toughest place he could find to prove himself. Tig left the Marines as a sergeant but didn't want to stop doing military work. So in 2003, he signed up as a contract operator. After a year in the Army's Camp Doha in Kuwait and some time back home, Tig joined the private military company Blackwater. Security stints followed in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, where avoiding mortar fire became part of the daily routine. On paper, Tig didn't meet certain GRS operator qualifications, but his experience and persistence won him a shot at the screening program. He earned his way in. On his first trip to Benghazi in February of 2012, Tig returned home early when his wife, former diesel mechanic in the U.S. Army, gave birth to 2 months prematurely to twins, a boy and girl. While when Jack arrived, Tig was on his third stay in the region, which made him the most experienced GRS operator in Benghazi. Tig had a hard edge. He wasn't a big talker, but his fellow operators learned to appreciate his sardonic wit and his dark humor. One day, he found a disabled flamethrower in Benghazi and used it to create a series of staged photos in which he looked like an action movie hero setting fire as he marched alone down an abandoned street. None of the operators doubted that they could count on Tig in the action if the action became real. Tig considered loyalty to be his greatest strength, but also his main weakness. I am loyal to people who've tried to screw me over. The operators were slaves to the assignments, posted on the team room whiteboard, which was usually maintained by Roan, who was the highest ranking contractor and the assistant team leader. Endless tasks awaited Benghazi CIA case officers, from gathering intelligence throughout the restive city of developing local sources. Generally, they were engaged in highly classified activities typical of Western spies in unstable countries. Like all case officers in Muslim countries, one of their tasks was to constantly plumb the depths of Al Qaeda's sympathy and affiliation. 21st century case officers, or COs, were more likely to be Ivy League valedictorians than licensed to kill Jason Bourne types. That meant they needed GRS operators, even if the COs often acted as though they'd handled danger fine on their own. The Benghazi operators felt that the COs treated them as excess baggage, slowing them down and getting in the way. Yet every operator in Benghazi had a story about young, inexperienced case officers walking blithely into trouble or failing to perceive a threat, only to be steered clear of danger by the GRS escort. One night, not long after Jack arrived, he and Roan teamed up to protect the case officer on an intelligence gathering operation in the heart of the city. Roan and Jack conducted counter surveillance to make sure the CIA staffer wasn't being followed. Jack watched unseen as two Arab men began trailing the case officer, who was oblivious as he strolled towards Roan's car. Jack tried to call Roan to inform him about the tail and to set up a new meeting place, so Jack's cover wouldn't be blown when he returned to the car. That proved impossible, so Jack got in the passenger seat and told the case officer in back, "You're being followed." The unknown men jumped into a car and began driving close behind the Americans. Roan hit the gas, expertly avoiding the usual traffic snarls and roadblocks. Eventually, Roan lost the tail and returned them safely to the annex. GRS operator Chris Tonto Peranto described the case officer's failings in the salty vernacular of a gung-ho former Army Ranger. They're not combat COs. They're intel collectors. They're fucking glorified desk jockeys. That's what they are. They're smart people, but smart people doesn't outsmart a bullet. They don't want us there until something bad happens. Tonto had felt a similar attitude among certain CIA staffers earlier in his GRS career, but he considered none worse than Bob, the Benghazi CIA base chief. As far as he's concerned, he's we're Walmart security guards. No one on the GRS team, perhaps no one in Benghazi, had a bigger personality than Tonto. The basic outline of his life could describe any number of people. 41 years old, 5'9", 175 pounds, brown hair, hazel eyes, the middle child of a college football coach and first grade teacher, gifted athlete, fishing enthusiast, twice married, and devoted father of a boy he called Bubba and a girl he called Princess. Former member of the Army's 75th Ranger Regiment, holder of a master's degree in criminal justice and owner of an insurance adjusting business. A more vivid picture of Tonto emerged from his candid self-assessment. Teenage vandal, adrenaline junkie, one-time steroid dealer, loose cannon, go-too-far practical joker, and a bit of an egomaniac. Take a bullet friend, warrior, and teammate. Worst student body president in his high school's history, serially imperfect husband, contract operator who rolled through Kabul blasting the Ricky Martin song La Bamba with his windows open. A brief vision of his life philosophy: if you're going to die, go down laughing, laughing and fighting. Tonto's other distinguishing characteristics were tattoos on his muscular body. One on his rib cage made it appear as though his skin was being ripped open to reveal an American flag within. One on his shoulder displayed the Army Ranger tab and scroll insignia. Another, covering his back from shoulder to shoulder, was a customized version of the iconic painting of Raphael of St. Michael, vanquishing Satan. Instead of Raphael's wooden spear, Tonto told the tattoo artist to give the saint a crusader shield and a spear made from a crucifix. The design reflected Tonto's desire for God to help him destroy the demons in his life. Demons that ended his first marriage and interrupted his military career. It also symbolizes my job, he'd say. You feel yourself as an avenging angel. You're killing or destroying or pushing back the evil in this world. There's not a lot of it that's out there, and people still don't understand. Correction, there's a lot of it out there, and people just don't understand that people think they can reason with it. You can't. They're evil, and they will kill you. I don't wish the Crusades would come back, added Tonto, who'd spent a decade working as a contract operator, much of it in Muslim countries. But I sometimes feel that they should come back. The tattoo is more or less a Christian warrior emblem, which a lot of us think that we are and believe that we are. We believe that we're warriors for the U.S., warriors for each other, but also warriors for God. Some same as the terrorists, I guess. Warriors for God. It's just I don't blow up and kill little girls. I don't go blow up myself and kill women indiscriminately. I never shot anybody that hasn't been shooting at me. Another Tontoism. The last thing in the world that you're going to have when the money runs out or everybody leaves you is your word, your balls, and your word. If you can't say that you have stuck those out there and done everything you can to protect people, you ain't got anything. If you're not honest and willing to give your life for your brother, you're not worth your weight in piss. Tonto had a special place in his heart for the Ranger Creed, particularly the fifth stanza, which begins, energetically will I meet the enemies of my country. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained and will fight with all my might. Surrender is not a Ranger word. Tonto kept things lively at the Benghazi CI annex. The garrulous Tonto usually partnered with his good friend and roommate, the taciturn Dave D.B. Benton. A 38-year-old, D.B. had black hair, brown eyes, a compact, muscular build. A middle child born to mixed race parents. D.B. grew up in Pennsylvania where he hated school, loved the outdoors, and idolized a grandfather who taught him respect, integrity, courage, humility, empathy, and discipline. Above all, above all, he taught me how to win and he taught me how to lose. A military career seemed a natural inheritance. DB's father served as a corpsman in the Navy and his uncles served in the Army and Marine Corps. His older brother preceded DB in the Marines, and the two served together from 1993 to 2000. During his years as a Marine Sergeant, DB served as a member of Maritime Special Purpose Force, a special operations capable unit trained for everything from hostage rescue to direct action assaults. DB was a scout sniper whose specialties included surveillance, reconnaissance, and close quarters battle. After leaving the Marines, DB joined a police SWAT team in Georgia. But after 9/11, he felt compelled to return to military service. He'd already been in contact with a Marine recruiter when a friend told him of an opportunity to work for the State Department as a contract personnel security specialist. Since then, DB had collected multiple awards for performance under fire in hotspots, including Iraq, Afghanistan, and Haiti. One of those awards came in Iraq in 2004 when DB worked for the State Department under a contract with Blackwater. He was the team leader in a 5 vehicle convoy ambushed while driving through Baghdad after escorting Secretary of State Colin Powell to the airport. As the driver of the lead vehicle sped towards safety, DB calmly kept the rest of the convoy updated on what was happening, allowing them to respond to the insurgents and escape the ambush without casualties, according to the citation that he received. Married to his high school sweetheart, DB had a son and 2 daughters. His biggest worry was that he might let someone down who relied on him, so he remained on permanent guard to prevent that from happening. His favorite author was Joseph Campbell, who wrote famously about myth making and the hero's journey. DB considered one of DB considered one of Campbell's maxims especially apt. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. DB's friendship with Tonto was sealed when they worked together for the State Department in Baghdad in 2004. At the end of a workday, they were relaxing atop a Humvee when a Russian-made Katyusha rocket flew over their heads into a tent with more than 30 military contractors inside. DB knew that a natural reaction for some people would be to run the other way, but he and Tonto simultaneously had the opposite response, sprinting side by side into the smoke-filled tent to see who needed help. In the years that followed, both felt they developed a sixth sense that allowed each to know how the other would react when all hell broke loose. Trips beyond the annex walls, called moves, could happen at any time, day or night. Though Benghazi was unsafe for most Westerners, the operators prided themselves on knowing the city like natives and on being comfortable and confident enough to move by car or on foot almost anywhere they chose. The engines of their cars and SUVs were meticulously maintained, while the exteriors were invariably beaten up. Cars without dirt and dings in Benghazi revealed their owners as rich people, Americans or both. Growing beards and wearing local clothes, the operators tried to blend in, or at least not to stand out quite so much. They ate in restaurants, frequented coffee shops and hotels, shopped in the stores and bazaars, and even walked like tourists through a small art museum located in an ancient palace near the port. Tonto's travels formed his impression of Benghazi as a seedy, savage city, ruled by dangerous militias and fueled by oil guns and the almighty dinar. Still, the operators knew that their lack of Arabic language skills and their distinctly American way of carrying themselves could put targets on their back. So they took pains to attract as little notice as possible. Usually, the operators traveled armed with concealed knives and pistols. Some had custom leather holsters that allowed them to hide their guns without conspicuous bulges. Jack developed a quick draw technique, lifting his shirt with his left hand, grabbing his pistol with his right, that an Old West gunfighter would have envied. Their cars carried their long guns, legally dependable assault rifles. Depending on the perceived danger of a move, the operators might drive armored vehicles or wear body armor with bullet stopping inserts they called chicken plates. Just as often, they used locally purchased cars, which they called soft skin vehicles, and eschewed personal armor to avoid calling attention to their movements. Sometimes they found greater safety in stealth than armor. Occasionally, the entire global response staff team would be on duty for a move, but more often they worked in a small unit, with Jack and Roan frequently assigned together. Jack's roommate Tig usually partnered with contractor Mark Geist, whose call sign was Oz. Beefy and self-assured at 46, Oz was the oldest member of the team. A shade under 6 feet tall, weighing more than 200 pounds, Oz had thick blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, and a country boy's way about him. In junior high and high school, Oz rode bulls in rodeos and broke wild horses. Since childhood, he dreamed of becoming a soldier, a police officer, a cowboy, or a firefighter. He'd achieved the first three. The grandson of a World War II tank commander, Oz had youthful memories of stacking hay, saving a calf during birth by turning it around in its mother's womb, and plucking the feathers off chickens whose necks had been wrung by his grandmother. He had a half-inch scar across his upper lip from being kicked in the mouth while branding a calf. Oz had joined the Marines when he turned 18. After a dozen years in the service, including time in an intelligence unit, Oz left to become a deputy sheriff and a police investigator. Later, he became chief of police in a small town in eastern Colorado near where he grew up. Then started a private investigation business where he did bail bonding and bounty hunting. Before going to work as a GRS operator, Oz did contract security work for the State Department in Iraq starting in 2004. He also trained Iraqi SWAT teams and provided personal protection for a former prime minister of Iraq while working for another American contracting firm. Oz's unusual resume included security work on a contract basis for Russian and Ukrainian airlines. Twice married, Oz had his son with his first wife and a teenage stepdaughter and an infant daughter with his second. Working with Roan, Jack, Tig, Tonto, DB, and Oz was a young CIA staffer. He didn't have the military background or training of the contract operators, but agency's rules made him the Benghazi GRS team leader. His identity was confidential, so the other GRS operators usually called him by his radio call sign or referred to him by his title, abbreviated TL. Several of the 6 contract operators were old friends, like Jack and Roan, and Tonto and DB. Some had worked alongside each other before, like Tig and DB in Benghazi or elsewhere, while some were on their first GRS trip together. Regardless of whether they knew one another before arriving in Benghazi, all were connected networks of former special operators and security contractors. For instance, Jack and Tonto had never worked together prior to Benghazi, but they were linked through a third operator. While working on a contract basis in Tripoli, Tonto had become friends with Jack and Roan's old SEAL buddy, Glenn Doherty, also known as Bub, who continued to work on the GRS security team in the Libyan capital. Some GRS security teams coexisted but never meshed, which wasn't surprising given the number of testosterone fueled alpha males among the operators and their different service backgrounds. Some grew surly and withdrawn in the harsh and stressful conditions under which they worked. The GRS team in Benghazi during September 2012 certainly could have gone that way. Yet they gelled. They trusted one another in tight situations and they liked working and hanging out together. When the chief had a night off, they'd make runs into the city for trunk loads of pizza and shawarma. Sometimes at night, when the work was done, they'd build a fire in a 50-gallon drum and sit around the pond talking, smoking a hookah pipe, and making each other laugh. All were in their late 30s or 40s. All had been around, and all had wives and kids they'd loved and could support more easily with their GRS pay. Their comfort among each other factored into the equation when Ronan Tonto and DB were scheduled to return home at the beginning of September. Instead, all three extended their time in Benghazi to help with the upcoming visit of the U.S. ambassador. When they weren't working or planning their next moves, the GRS operators cleaned their weapons, practiced shooting, updated their mapping software and other computer tools, and maintained their vehicles. Day and night, whenever they were in the annex, they understood that they constituted a quick reaction force. If anyone from the annex or the State Department's Special Mission Compound was in danger, they'd respond. While on standby, most played video games. A voice would ring out over the radio, ordering operators to report for tactical training. The GRS guys knew that was code for Call of Duty tournament on Xbox in Building B. During the fiercely competitive games, Tonto and Oz would engage in brutal trash talking that inevitably began with the phrase, your mama, and ended with anatomically impractical suggestions. As a running joke, during meals or just walking through the annex, one would randomly call out the cliche line from every bad horror or war movie. I've got a bad feeling about this. They'd read, talked, watched pirated movies on CDs purchased from local shops, called and sent emails home, worked out, ran and napped. Jack called his bed a time machine because every hour of shut eye transported him 1 hour closer to returning to his family. That desire became more intense following a Skype session with his wife shortly after Jack arrived in Benghazi. She surprised him with news that she was pregnant. His excitement was tempered by the thought of another mouth to feed, another college education to plan for, and above all, another person relying on him to get home safely. Jack's non work routine also included regular visits to the large olive tree next to Building D that was the home to a neon green praying mantis, almost as big as his hand. The tree had a fly trap with one way opening on top, so flies lured to the bait couldn't get out. Jack watched up close as the giant mantis perched motionless above the opening, blending with the leaves. The moment its prey landed, the mantis would strike, catching the fly in its spindly front legs, then devouring it. The mantis had a bulging stomach, testament to its speed and the endless food supply. Between flies, the mantis often turned to its triangular head and calmly watched Jack watching it. After the mantis had eaten 3 or 4 flies, it would leave its spot at the fly trap buffet and climb higher into the tree. The mantis fascinated Jack, who considered it like a pet. Yet in a hostile city where Americans made ripe targets for radical extremists who could bend effortlessly who could blend effortlessly into their surroundings, Jack could also identify as the fly. While Jack studied the mantis, Tanto had a different way of killing time between moves. Walking through the annex, he'd pass the security camera and break into a wild dance, then resuming walking as though nothing had happened. Tonto also enjoyed getting to know the Libyans they hired as local guards. One regularly hit him up for candy bars, so Tonto nicknamed him Snickers. Tonto kept his new pal well supplied, then watched as the formerly skinny guard grew a spare tire. You try to befriend them, so at least they're a damn speed bump if we get attacked, he'd say. It's hearts and minds thing. Tonto had strong opinions on most things, none stronger than his views on the best kind of operators in a place like Benghazi. Guys that are ramped up all the time are not good GRS operators. They won't last at the job. You have to be able to associate, go to a restaurant, be out in town, go walk, and order a paper or order a coffee. If you're always looking like you're about ready to get in a fight, the locals will pick that up quicker than shit. But also, you can't be so low key that when the shit hits the fan, you can't turn the light switch on and go 100 miles an hour. Tonto prided himself on being able to go from 0 to 100 in 5 seconds, if not quicker. Usually every Friday, American security team members from the Special Mission Compound drove to the annex for a status update and a talk about the week ahead. The visitors were members of the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, known as DS, the law enforcement and security arm of the State Department. Congress created the Bureau in 1985 as part of a response to the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Embassy and Marine Corps barracks in Beirut. Another impetus was the 1979 abduction of Adolf Dubs, the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan. Dubs died during a rescue attempt. No American ambassador had been killed in office since then. Inside the United States, more than 2,000 DS officers worked for the Diplomatic Security Service. To safeguard the Secretary of State, the visiting dignitaries, everyone from Yasser Arafat to the Dalai Lama. On U.S. soil, the DS agents also issued security clearance, conducted cybersecurity investigations, and battled passport and visa fraud. The larger and usually dicier role for diplomatic security agents fell beyond American borders. Globally, some 800 DS staff agents supplemented more than 30,000 security contractors, oversaw the safe conduct of American foreign policy. Their job was to protect personnel on sensitive information at roughly 275 diplomatic outposts in 157 countries. The job was endless. Between 1998 and 2012, one government study found U.S. diplomatic facilities and personnel came under significant attack 273 times, not including almost constant assaults on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad since 2004. DS agents assigned a threat level to every diplomatic outpost based on 6 categories: international terrorism, indigenous terrorism, political violence, crime, human intelligence, and technical threat. The threat levels were low, medium, high, or critical. The last two were defined as having serious or grave impact on American diplomats. During 2012, more than half of all American diplomatic outposts around the world were considered critical or high for the threat of terrorism. However, only 14 were considered dangerous enough for the DS to deem the threat level critical or high in every category. 2 of those were in Libya, Tripoli, and Benghazi. For the DS agents in Libya, one of the biggest events in summer of 2012 was a 5-day visit to Benghazi, starting September 10th, being planned by Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, who normally was based at the embassy in Tripoli. To help the DS agents in advance of Stevens' visit, the Annex's GRS operators conducted a security assessment of the special mission compound where Stevens would stay. During the review, Tonto asked the D agents how many security team members they'd have on hand when the ambassador visited, not including local militiamen or other Libyans hired as guards. Five, they told him, each armed with an M4 assault rifle, a mainstay weapon of the U.S. military. Tonto learned that the DS agents collectively had about a dozen years of military experience. He knew that the Annex operators had closer to 100 years of collective military and contracting experience, much of it on elite security teams. The GRS team also had larger and more powerful weapons. You guys get attacked by any big element, Tonto told him, you're going to die. Realizing that he'd come across stronger than intended, Tonto reassured the DS agents, if you need assistance, we're going to help you. So during the first week of September, with the ambassador's visit just days away, Rome put his nursing and paramedic training to use by offering a refresher medical course for all Annex staffers. He walked them through the proper field response to gunshot wounds, explosion injuries, and other traumas. After a classroom session in Building D, Ron set up a practical exercise outside, using Jack as the victim, in a scenario in which he supposedly was hit by a grenade. Ketchup substituted for blood on Jack's bare leg. Ron instructed everyone how to properly use a tourniquet and to safely evacuate a victim. Another day, Ron and Jack drove to the diplomatic compound with Bob, the Annex base chief. While Bob attended a meeting, Jack and Ron sat at an outdoor table under a covered patio with two DS agents, Dave Ubin and Scott Wicklund. Ubin was a big guy, about 6'4", 250 pounds, with dark hair and a handlebar mustache that he was growing as part of a competition among the State Department security agents. Wicklund stood about 5'10", had a medium build, sandy brown hair, and light eyes. The wispy fuzz on his upper lip suggested Wicklund was competing in the cheesy mustache competition, too. Jack and Ron were ready to declare Ubin the winner. The four men talked about their families and their prior military careers. Jack and Ron as SEALs, Ubin in the Army, and Wicklund as a Navy rescue swimmer. Wicklund and Ubin confided in the operators that they'd repeatedly requested more diplomatic security personnel at the compound because they were short-staffed. Those requests had fallen on deaf ears. They told Jack and Ron that they couldn't understand why. In an effort to help, the operators arranged a drill to teach the DS agents ways to respond to a terrorist attack. The scenario called for an enemy force to attempt to overrun the Annex. But the operators explained that the same principles would apply if the target were the diplomatic compound. They rehearsed how to respond to active shooters inside the walls, how to keep track of all personnel who needed protection, above all the ambassador. A practice the operators called accountability. The operators demonstrated the protocols they used for such events to simultaneously repel an attack, and ensure the safety of the staffers they called non-shooters. By the time the drill ended, Jack concluded that their small numbers and lack of their special operator military training would put the 5 DS agents who'd been guarding the ambassador at an extreme disadvantage if the compound came under attack. Sitting around together over morning coffee, Jack and Ron frequently discussed flaws in security at both the compound and the Annex. As contract operators, they were powerless to change the security system, but that didn't stop them from identifying holes in the defensive shield. Anticipating why terrorists might exploit them and brainstorming potential responses, some of the weak points they discussed were structural, involving the Annex and the compound property's design. Some perceived problems focused on staff levels and training. The macabre scenarios ranged from a truck bomb parked outside the Annex wall to a large force of attackers overrunning the compound. As the anniversary of 9/11 attacks approached, coinciding with the ambassador's planned visit, Roan taped an 8 by 10 sheet of paper on a whiteboard in the GRS team room. On it was a printed warning that the GRS operators felt certain had come from somewhere higher up the chain of clandestine services in Washington. As several operators were called, the intelligence cable warned. Be advised, we have reports from locals that a Western facility or U.S. Embassy consulate government target will be attacked in the next week. If those weren't the exact words, that was the unambiguous message the operators took from the cable. As a precaution, the operators moved their body armor, long guns, ammunition, night vision goggles, and other tactical gear into their bedrooms so they could more quickly jock up, as they called preparing for battle. Discussions had been underway for some time about co-locating the compound and the annex on the same property. So Bob, the annex chief, suggested a trial run. He urged the diplomatic security team at the special mission compound to move to the annex during the ambassador's visit for added layers of protection. The offer, the offer was declined. In the days after Rome posted the intel cable, GRS team members signed their initials on the paper to show that they'd read it. It remained on all of their minds, but none were unnerved by it. When Oz read it, he concluded that it lacked a specific date or location. So he took no special action other than just being extra vigilant, as always. It's nothing to worry about. When Tonto saw that everyone on the team had initialed the cable, he peeled it off the whiteboard and shredded it. The date was September 11th, 2012. Well, that's the end of chapter 2. I just want to see if anybody's out there got any questions on it. We are free to talk about that for a little bit. Not sure if we have anything heading up this way, but okay. So, Chad Shockey, how close would you say the actors represented the team's adaptation of your experience? You know, Chad, you couldn't have asked for a better group of actors, I don't think. I mean, each one of them really got to know us, know our backgrounds, know who we were as people, not just about what our military or contracting lives were like, but they also wanted to know how we were, growing up. Max Martini, who portrayed me, it was kind of weird at first because he's asking about things that I just had nothing to do with Benghazi. But when I questioned him about it, is he was really wanting to be me in the movie, and that's kind of how he wanted to know who I was and how I was and how he got to know and use that information to get into character. So I was great. I was really proud about and happy about how they portrayed us. They all put forth a great effort. Tammy Hawthorne asked, how often do you see the other team members? And has to be a heck of a party. Since Benghazi, we've all getting back home kind of separated into our own lives and our own adventures to continue taking care of our families. But there's several times a year that we'll get together either by phone or in person. The one time that we're always probably talking to each other is definitely on the anniversary of Benghazi on September 11th and 12th. Larry Kinzer, what do you like to do in your downtime to relax? It was an honor to meet you at NRA in Dallas a few years ago. Thank you for your service. What do I like to do in my downtime to relax? The best thing I get to do is when I'm home is I get to spend it with my my little girl who's just turned 8 this last month, and my wife. Over my time is a contractor and in law enforcement. I I didn't get to spend a lot of time together. So we are trying to make up for all that now. Meredith, during your time in Benghazi, how did y'all have to bring your own rifles and equipment, or was it supplied to y'all? Um, you know, we had to, most of our equipment, um, other than our firearms, we would bring ourselves. And then we would make each, those items specific to ourselves on how we like to use them. Mary um, asked, "How are you after your injuries?" Well, Mary, we're getting a little bit ahead of in the book because I haven't got injured yet, but you know, um, I'm recovering real well. My left hand has limited feeling in it, but from the injuries that I had, it would have been very easily for them just to take it off and have a prosthetic, which would have caused a whole lot more problems than what I have. But all of those are, all those injuries that I have are, they're going to continue to be a part of my life the whole time. But you just move forward. Um, Life could be a whole lot worse. I could be 6 feet under and not be able to be with my family. Josh Perry asked, "What's in the cup, Oz?" Just a little bit of apple juice, Josh. You know me. Bob Dickinson. Bob says, "It appears that Bob was out of his element. Why the animosity towards your team?" Um, Max wanted to be a Melanier. Okay. Bob Dickinson is a friend from my childhood. Went to high school together, and the town that we grew up in was a town called Rocky Ford, and big farm, kind of a farm and ranching community. One of the products that is known from there, it was the at one time it's been the melon capital of the world. It has the best watermelons and cantaloupes that you can get. So I'm gonna give a shout out to Rocky Ford for that. If you ever get a chance to try those, you'll uh, you'll love them. Bob, you're to answer your question. Bob, I think our chief of base was a on his last tour, if I recall correctly, and he was ready to retire out of the agency. Last thing he wanted to do was have a problem, but also, those older guys that had came up, some of them transferred well into the modern day CIA and the elements of the battlefield and how they'd changed. Um, as well as the idea of how collection of intel has changed over the years as well, from the Cold War to what we now have in, clandestine services in third world countries, things like that. I mean, when you're working in those kind of environments, um, it's a lot different than what it was in the Cold War. There was, the Cold War, I think there was a lot more respect between the agencies, the spy agencies, and this day and age, there is no one out there that um, in these kind of conflicts we're getting into now that really give two cares about human life, no matter what it is. And if you don't make that transition and learn to know your people, know your men, and what they can do for you, it's a good chance that you're going to have some struggles. Um, Jillian Anderson, do you did you have any say in who played you in the movie? And did I get to train them before the movie at all? No, I didn't. Unfortunately, or actually, fortunately, I guess is that I didn't have a say in it, but I think my wife did because she chose Max Martini for me. I think she's always kind of had a little crush on him from his days when he played in the unit. My oldest daughter um, had always teased her about why she liked Max so much, and that was or was attracted to him because he looked so much like me. As for the training, now there was a great group of guys that Michael Bay works with. Most of them are Navy SEALs. Harry Humphreys runs that group and does a lot of the stunt coordination and training of the actors. And they're all Harry Humphreys is a Team One plank holder for the Navy SEALs. Um, so they definitely get the training that they need and were brought up to speed. Bill George, Bill asks, did you ever do contract work in Afghanistan? I was there doing a contract with the DOS for embassy security 2008 to 2010. Um, yes and no. I did contract work where I was in and out of Afghanistan. Most of that, I was working with a group that we had started our own airline. It was called Kabul Air, and we had contracted with Ukrainian and Russian pilots um, to fly the planes, and we were just transporting military cargo around. And my job was just to make sure that what was supposed to get to where it was got there. But most of my time was coming in and out of Afghanistan. There'd be a few overnights, you know, but most of the time you learned a little bit of Russian or a little bit of Ukrainian, and because they didn't have a problem at all, those crews walking around downtown Kabul or up in Mosul Sharif when we were in any of those areas. And obviously, they weren't allowed to be free out on any of the military bases because they were all U.S. military bases. We got three more questions. Tracy, what made you guys tell as much a good team more than any other team? Common skills, passions, expertise, um, able to navigate differences in personalities. Well, it's just professionalism. You when you're in a place like that, especially where you're living in confined quarters that close to each other, there is always that possibility where you're going to have those differences in personalities, and you just put that stuff aside because it's the greater mission that matters more than anything. You know, there's plenty of time in life not to have those differences, but when you're in an area like Benghazi or on the battlefield, that's not a place to bring those things out or let those things interfere with accomplishing your mission. Steve asks, were any of the COs ever armed, or did they solely rely on GRS at all times? And asked and said, "Thank you for your service." Every CO has a level of expertise in firearms, and that's what they do. But it's kind of like for myself, I guess I'll give the example is, I do a lot of public speaking now, or well, I did until the corona virus, and our wonderful governor decided to kind of keep us in quarantine. But you know, um, while I'm speaking, I have a service dog that also kind of alerts me if there's anything that's kind of nefarious in my vicinity. And people ask, why do I need something like that? It's because when I'm doing my job as speaking, my focus isn't on security, and that's why I have a service dog for that reason, or one of many reasons why I have the service dog. But kind of the same thing when you got COs out there doing their job, they're focusing on dealing with people and interacting with the ones that they have to interact with, and they don't always have that in a fast moving environment like somewhere in Benghazi to be able to be aware of what's always going on around them. Lisa, how did you feel about Bob wanting to stay and collect intel? Well, I think what you're referring to is at the end of the book and at the end of the event, while we were trying to get out of there, Bob was kind of wanting to say that he wanted to stay and do his job. Well, Bob, I myself couldn't really respond to that because I was kind of out of sorts myself. I was on a gurney in the back of a Hilux pickup truck. Um, I didn't have that interaction with Bob, but a lot of what the guys have told me is a lot of that has to do with one, a lot of shell shock and um, just not really fully understanding and wanting, his idea is he wants to stay and complete the job, but he fails to understand that, and a lot of it's because of the shell shock of what went through. Because imagine, I mean, three 81 millimeter mortars landed right on top of their rooftop, and that shook up people a lot. The last two that we have right now are Brian. Brian says, "Is there anything not in the movie which you wanted told?" There's a few differences between the movie and the book. Um, Michael Bay did his best to keep it as to the spirit of the movie or to the spirit of the book as possible. And I would have to say he did a wonderful job. There's a few things show that he in the movie he tried to demonstrate. One was that relationship between Ty and Jack, uh, both in the beginning and the end throughout the whole movie, because in reality, Ty and Jack were close friends from back in their days in the teens. But they wanted to demonstrate that, and um, it wasn't a documentary, so they weren't going to keep to the exact facts as it was portrayed in the book. But I am very happy with the way that they did that. Paramount and Michael Bay, you couldn't ask for a better group to do the movie, and I was really proud to be on set for the majority of it, along with Tonto and Tig and the other guys that could. But it was a great representation. Um, Last is Kathy. Kathy, why the name Oz? And so, Kathy, to answer your question, so when I kind of, I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but the long or short of it is, when I was in the Marine Corps, we never really had personal call signs. That was usually left to pilots. It was your unit call sign, and depending on where you were in that unit, would be if you were a radio operator, team leader, or assistant team leader. So when I first got to um, Iraq on my first contracting job with Triple Canopy, I arrived and the guys asked me that had been there for a while, hey, what's your call sign? And I'm like, what do you mean call sign? They're like, well, what do you call yourself? I'm like, I call myself Mark. And they're like, no, you got to have a call sign. And, you know, I kind of was thinking, I was born at night, just not last night. And I knew kind of what they were looking for. They're looking for those guys that kind of roll in on contracts and, they've got that call sign that they've already made up as, I don't know, trying to be some uh, macho call sign or something like that. Well, because they said, well, you better pick one because you don't want us to make it. I'm like, with what you guys are paying me, uh, you can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for payday. So about 4 or 5 days later, I still hadn't gotten a call sign from them. So I asked them, I'm like, you guys got a call sign for me? And they said, yeah, it was Poulter. So for the first year of my contracting, I was called Poulter because um, my last name's Geist, Poltergeist. It took them 5 days to figure that out. And most of those guys were either Army or Navy SEAL. So, that kind of tells you their intellect capability of that, their ability to, and creative capability of coming up with just that. Um, Honestly, I think that they were trying to see if I would screw up. We had one guy on our team, that first team I served with was called Buttstock. And that's because when we first got over there, we were using AK-47s. They had collapsible buttstocks, and this guy jumped out and was trying to get his buttstock uncollapsed and folded out, and he couldn't do it. So for the rest of his life, he's going to be known as Buttstock. And we talked to him today. If I talk to him, it's still that. Then a couple contracts later, I got to a place and there was somebody called Poulter or Potter. So Potter and Poulter didn't work well over the radio, too easy to misidentify. So they started calling me Wizard of Oz. The exact reason I'm not sure about that. Um, but then I got to my next contract, and my next contract, there was somebody there named Wizard. So it kind of got cut down to Oz. Um, Let me look through these. because I'm getting flagged over here that I am missing a question. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I apologize. I just got to scroll down on this thing. Tells you how they didn't write it in crayon, so that's going to be the reason for that. I'll take that. Janet, I think we got four or five more. Janet asked, "Hey, Mark, that photo above your head on your left. Can you tell us about it?" The one on my left over here it's me and Max on set. We were just kind of going around. It actually started a little bit earlier. It's the scene of going into the special mission compound or to the consulate. And my one thing I wanted to have a cameo in this movie. And Michael Bay said that there's no way he was going to do that. It's not something that he does is allow cameos. Personally, I'm going to call you out on that, Michael Bay. I think it's because he didn't want to compete against Peter Berg, who had done the movie for um, Marcus Luttrell with Lone Survivor. And of course, anybody who's seen that knows that Marcus was able to be in that like what 4 or 5 times. And God bless him for being able to do that and having a wonderful director that respected his wishes in doing that. But I think it was that competition between Michael Bay and Peter Berg. There was no way one of them is going to do something the other one did, because then they're going to get their balls busted that, hey, you're trying to act like me. You're mimicking me. So that's what it was. So me and Max had kind of planned this. So kind of a backstory to it is on every scene and every set of clothing that the actors would wear, there's 2 or 3 extra sets in wardrobe. So I had snuck into wardrobe and got a second set of clothes that Max was wearing that day. And prior to taking these 2 pictures, we had switched out without Michael Bay knowing it. And it worked out just fine until I looked right at the camera and made a kind of an off-color comment. Um, and Michael Bay saw that and blew up on set for a second. Everybody else knew that I was there. And we kind of let Michael Bay know that we kind of got over on him. Um, let's see. Crystal asks, "How can I stop Roan from alerting that I'm getting packages and exposing my shopping habits? Asking for a friend." Well, uh, gonna have to call Josh in on that one. And Josh, if you're still listening, if you can respond to that one, I'll let everyone out there know what she's talking about. Roan is my service dog, and every time a package comes to the front door, Roan alerts me and lets me know that my wife's been shopping. Um, let's see. Nick is asking, "Hey, do you still stay in contact with Jack?" Yeah, we still stay in contact. I know I stay in contact with Jack, and Jack stays in contact with the other guys. We talk every few months or so just to see how everybody's doing, making sure that lately over the coronavirus, we've talked a couple times, just making sure that we're all kind of handling it. It's kind of your fire team of faith, I guess you kind of call that. Is we're gonna always keep track of each other. It's no matter how far we get apart after going through something like this. There's going to be inevitably be that connection that'll always be there. Marta Santiago, I know there is confidentiality, but have you heard if how some of the other staff there are doing today? I was wondering about the State Department agents who you got out of the embassy. Well, the State Department guys, they're doing most of the guys that I've talked with. I haven't talked with them, to be honest, in a couple of years, but I know that they've been doing really well. They're continuing their work, as far as I know, with State Department, taking those experiences and hopefully passing them on and keeping others safe around the world. Paul says, Oz, do you think that if the ambassador had asked for more assistance directly, it would have been honored? Well, several times the ambassador had asked for more security, and I've never been able to get a clear and definitive answer to that, why that was never answered. Um, I think it's a lack of leadership on past administration in how they handled those kind of things. And they were worried more about the politics of things than listening to the guys on the ground. Chad is Tonto as wild as he is portrayed. Um, Tonto is portrayed. I would have to say that if any actor got their character exactly right, and that was Tonto. I mean, I love him to death. Uh, Tonto is Tonto, and he's that guy that is he's going to be cutting up, going to be bringing the a little bit of levity to those stressful situations. It's just the way he's built, and you know you got to love him for his peculiarities. Mariah, Mariah says, "Did you, Tig, Tonto, and Boone and Jack want to play yourselves in 13 hours?" Um, I no, I can speak for myself as I didn't want to play myself in the whole movie. I think that was just asking one a little bit much. Two is, I mean, I probably couldn't act my way out of a wet paper bag. So I think depending on Michael Bay and his choice of actors was the best thing that could happen. And I am very proud to have the guys that portrayed us um, having done that. And very proud of everyone that was involved in the movie and the making of it. Also, Mitchell Zukoff, who was our writer, um, was able to put this book together in a way that I think very few authors out there could do. He took the stories of five of us and was able to meld it together in a way that, you know, as a lot of guys and gals out there said, once you pick it up and read it, it's really difficult to put it down. Um, just got another one in. May Blake asked, "Did Tonto really well wear shorts during the engagement?" I wish that I could say that he didn't, but yes, he did. Uh, and a lot of that wasn't out of choice; it was just out of expediency. That's what he was wearing. And when the call came over that the consulate was when the title or excuse me when the call came over the radio, it wasn't that they were under attack; it was that they had been overran. The information we had initially was that they were overran by approximately 40 armed insurgents, and the guys knew that if they didn't get over there quick, that there was going to be a lot of dead Americans. And luckily, the guys over at the consulate were able to at least hold off in their safe rooms until the rest of the guys could get there. And I I got to say, I think the Lord was watching out for us that night. We had a seventh man on our team, and that was the Lord watching out above, because the events that took place that night and the outcome that happened, where you had six guys, initially five guys go over to the consulate and repel, one take go on to a defended compound over that had been overran by 40 armed insurgents, push those guys off, rescue the remaining people that were there, the security team for the ambassador, recover Sean Smith's body, get back, and together we all repelled another three assaults, um, attacks on the annex. Couldn't have been done without the Lord's blessing. Um, Nick just chimed in and says, "Is there anything you would do differently in hindsight that night?" Um, yeah, I think if I could, if there was anything I could have changed that night, um, and not to get into the politics of things, but I wish we'd had a president like President Trump instead of the president that we had in the last administration, because I don't think that we would have had a problem getting help had President Trump been there, along with Secretary of State Pompeo. and the administration that's in now. We've seen that with the attack on Baghdad and other things that have happened around the world on U.S. facilities. Um, you know, we're not going to put up with somebody attacking our people, and that comes from the top on down. Um, Another one come in. Josh Weston asked, "What made you enlist in the Marine Corps?" I think that sense of service, a sense of being a part of something bigger than myself, was ingrained for me at a young age. You know, as I said, my grandfather served in World War II. He was a tank commander, served in North Africa, served in Patton's army as a tank commander, all the way pushed through the Battle of the Bulge up into the occupation of Germany. I'm at 5 Purple Hearts, a Silver Star, Bronze Star, French Protégé, Belgian Protégé, and not only that, I had 3 uncles that served in the military, 2 in the Navy and 1 in the Marine Corps. And for some reason, the Marine Corps was one of those things that was going to challenge me, put me to the test, and I knew that I needed that as a young boy um, growing up, because you know, and I think it was just being the best that I could, and that's kind of what drew me to doing that. And I have no regrets about it whatsoever. Couldn't have had a better place to serve, and the people that I served with were just phenomenal. Um, so that's the last question, and I'm going to have to cut it short because I am scheduled to jump onto a podcast. The podcast is going to start here in about 15 minutes. Um, let's see, I am going to be joining John DeLemon on Conservative Business Journal podcast here in about 15 minutes. So if you are still following and want to join us on that, look that up and follow. But also ask you to look at our website, both mine, markgeist.com, but more importantly, shadowwarriorsproject.org, as well as check out Batten Canine. They have a wonderful website on what they do and how they support. This is a group out of Canada that supports military veterans, and they do that by supporting Shadow Warriors Project and a couple other organizations, the Navy SEAL Museum, as well as Special Operations Wounded Warrior. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight, and we will be back on schedule next Wednesday. And we are looking at maybe bumping it up to doing it 2 nights a week. So we may do it Wednesday and Friday. If you're out there and you're wanting to read more of the book with us and join us, let us know what you think about doing it twice during the week. Thank you, and God bless you all. And we will see you next week. Have a great week, and stay safe and stay healthy. God bless.